So can you walk us through that story and how you came to this work?
Yeah, great question. So I think everybody has, thoughts in the back of their mind that we're so busy in our everyday lives that we just go through the motions. We're checking off all the boxes. And even though we may not be really satisfied with how things are going with ourselves or our relationships or our jobs or passions, our lives, we kind of put it away in the back of our head, right? So what happened to me is what probably happens to a lot of people is that when you're put in this situation where that back burner thought becomes kind of the primary issue, and you're forced to make a decision. So what happened is I had gone to college to study nutrition and medical school because I thought I was going to study nutrition in the body. And when I got out, I wasn't doing that. In fact, I was kind of doing the Western medicine model where you see a ton of patients and you prescribe a lot of medications. And this was like the end for me, like the end of the tunnel. I was supposed to be at my final destination. And I was like, wow, I don't know if I want, this is like going to be my life. I'll repeat forever. And then on the other hand, my personal health was suffering. I felt burnt out. I felt bloated. I felt brain fog. I had 2 little children who were constantly making me feel like I couldn't do enough at home. I couldn't do enough at work. And so I was really suffering in my mind, in my health, and in my hair. And I think what happened is it all culminated. So one day there was an impromptu meeting that in our office. And as a good physician, I had to stay. You have to stay for emergency meetings or impromptu meetings. And it was 5:00. And I knew I had to pick my children up by 6. And so as soon as it was about 5:45, I said, I just kind of got up and embarrassingly ran out. And I'm the only woman. I was thinking, wow, they're going to think like this lady's not, that dedicated.
Right.
She just ran out. And then on the other hand, I was feeling, oh my God, this studio, this karate place closes at 6 and my children cannot be there, my young children. And then on the other hand, I was feeling exhausted and stressed and anxious. Literally, I jumped in the car and I drove faster than I've ever driven before and super carelessly in my mind, because it was like I was kind of out of control. And this whole situation was a actual play-by-play of what was happening in my life, just out of control, stress, pulled in all different directions. And I was making a left turn to go into the area of the karate studio, and I got into this huge accident where there was 3 cars. The car I was in spun 3 times, hit the divider. Every airbag in the entire car went off. Everything crashed around me. And I got out of the car. The first thing I did was open the door of the car, and there was like all glass all over me. And it's like that adrenaline and that stress and that all came together. And that day I decided I can't live like this anymore. I need to do something for myself, for my mind, for my body, for any person who's asked to do so many things. Like something gives, something's got to give. And this was the breaking point. So when I was out of work for a few days, I had to say to myself, okay, what am I going to do for myself? How am I going to get myself out of this situation of personal burnout, feeling not myself, kind of out of body experience, and also the brain fog and dissatisfaction. So that's when I started to do the hard work and started to look into, okay, let me read about this. Let me ask my doctor colleagues about this. Let me see if I can figure this out myself. And when I was asking my doctor colleagues, they said, oh, this is normal. You're a mom. You're a busy physician, you have so many things going on, it's normal. And this is not normal. And so I started to do my own experimentation. Of course, it always comes down to food and mindset first. So I started to change the way I was thinking. I started to change the way I was eating. And almost instantly, I started to see a few changes. Now, I made a lot of mistakes on the way because I was reading everything I could about this. And I tried every plan and every diet and every mindset trick and every book. And I made a ton of mistakes, but slowly and surely I started to see some things that were working. So I pushed much harder on that. I researched that more. And, as I was going through this, I was like, maybe I should write about this, because every time I would talk about it with someone else, they would say, I feel the same way. I feel exhausted. I feel anxious. I feel like brain fog. I feel bloated. So I started to kind of write about what was working and what wasn't. And I submitted my first article to a site called Mind Body Green, which at the time was like a really small wellness site. And it was kind of my beautiful green light. They said, oh, this looks interesting. It was just like a quick reply. Oh, this looks interesting. We could work with this. And I was like, oh, I have like an outlet. I can tell someone about this. So I started writing for them regularly, once a week, once every other week. And that was kind of my escape from my regular daily routine. So it all culminated from that one accident, and which really fueled my personal journey, and then my wellness journey, which morphed my career and how I live my life today.
Beautiful. It is unfortunate we have to literally be hit over the head sometimes, you know, and crashed into in order to just awaken to what we already really know if we sat with it, right? We know we need to take some time for ourselves or reassess our lives.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So you said that a lot of people related to you, and I do. I'm a mom of 2 toddlers, and I remember going to the doctor feeling all of those same symptoms and him saying that it was normal because I'm a mom. And so what is the reason? Why are we tired all the time?
Yeah, no, that's a great question, because this is a part of medical healthcare it's a black hole. Nobody talks about that. I bet you, I'm sure, Jade, you had your blood tested and everything was normal, and your hormones and everything's normal. And so everybody, basically 90% of people get put in the bucket of, oh, you're getting older, you're a woman, this is normal. So what I realized is that there was a missing link. So our brain is connected to our gut, and our gut microbiome, is literally calling the shots all day. And what they do is they talk to our immune system and they talk to our hormones. So when you talk about hormone imbalance and you talk about lowered immune system or inflammation, or you talk about brain fog or fatigue, they're all part of the same system. So it's this I call it the energy trifecta: the gut, hormone, immune connection. They're constantly in communication with each other, and they're constantly communicating with our brain, and vice versa. So they're like, it's a constant crosstalk. And so what happens in our modern world is that because of both our thoughts, our food, and the way we live our lives, this connection becomes weaker. It's really very easily described in the gut, right? Our gut microbiome used to be much more diverse. I think 70% more diverse than it is now in modern times, because we used to eat all different fruits and vegetables and tubers, and we'd have all these different types of bacteria. And now we don't have that many types of bacteria. So imagine if you have a big city and half your police force and half your detectives and half your lawyers and half were not there. And there was just like a very skeleton crew. So what happens is when they're in charge, there's going to be miscommunication with the immune system, with the brain, with the hormones. And so you get all these negative symptoms that are all linked back to this problem. And part of the problem is our food, obviously. Problem is our lifestyle. We're really not getting enough nature time. So that's another thing. Circadian rhythms are completely flipped. So that's another problem. And so you can imagine that if you go ahead and fix that gut, that big city that's living there and functioning and really calling the shots between all the parts of your body, you're not only going to feel more energetic, but things are going to just work much smoother with your digestion and your disease in the future.
Yeah. I want to go over some of the basics there. You touched on the microbiome, but I think some of our audience might be even new to what that is. So maybe you can cover the definition of what the microbiome is and why it's important, why it is our gut health, why that's important, and making sure that we have a variety of the colonies of these different bacteria is important.
Yes, great question. So, the microbiome is this big city that I just described. Imagine if that city was literally calling the shots and helping your body decide. You won't believe it, but the microbiome is actually the outside world living inside of you. So if you go from your anus inside, it's an opening to the outside world. And basically there's bacteria, there's viruses, and there's parasites, and they're all living there. And actually, they're making more of the decisions along with your own immune system than your own cells. So you only have one little layer of gastrointestinal cells in your body, but there's a thick layer of bacteria, viruses, and parasites that are just sitting there very naturally
Mhm.
and are responsible for helping you. Like I said, it's a police force, it's a
Yeah.
detectives, it's a lawyers. And so some of it comes when we're born. So that's why vaginal labor is so important, because as you're traveling through your mother's vaginal tract, you get a bunch of that bacteria colonizing into your own gut. And then some of it comes from our childhood experiences, lots and lots of. So in the first 5 years of life, your microbiome is like constantly sucking everything in. So that's why they've noticed that children who grow up on farms have better microbiomes. They have children who grew up with lots and lots of other family members or animals.
More exposure.
Exposures, yes. And so, I really, really think that your microbiome is the center of this energy trifecta. And it's the place where not only digestion happens, but all the decisions on our hormones and our immune system happen. So during this time of COVID-19, you really do need to focus on your gut bacteria. You need to focus on your microbiome health. And same thing with hormones. So if I don't know about you, Jade, but I know when I was feeling tired, I was thinking, okay, there's something wrong with my hormones. And when you really look back, when you look at the hormones, it's all linked to the gut health as well.
Yeah.
So that, and microbiome, the microbiome is something that is not only in your gut, but it's also in your mouth. It's also in your vaginal tract. It's also in your underarms. It's on your skin. We are supposed to be colonized with trillions of bacteria. We're not supposed to be sterile. And so it's a concept that people don't even understand. Like, no, being sterile is not the goal. In fact,
and something you spoke to in the beginning, you were talking about we may have grown up eating more, previous generations might have had more access to a variety of different fruits and veg and tubers and all these different things that we're not necessarily getting in our daily American diet. But I think a big piece of that too is the stuff wasn't maybe as sterile either. Like the dirt on it carries so many bacteria that might be important. Not that people should go out and eat dirt because there's other toxins going into that now that we live by freeways and such. But yeah, I think it's amazing how far we've come from that. And there's so much people can point to why we've become this progressive species for some reasons, because we have agriculture, we have these industries that allow us to have convenient food and quick and easy where we don't spend all day cooking it and such. But there's so much that's also been kind of robbed from our food because we're not doing the hands-on, personal work.
And obviously we're doing something wrong in modern life. They found out in London, like at the turn of the century, 1900s, when all these Londoners got rich and moved into the cities, some of the doctors noticed, wow, these kids of these richer people are getting all these problems like allergies and asthma. And so they researched it back then. And that was in the early 90s. And they were looking at the similar kids in the farm still, and they were healthier. And so they had this hygiene hypothesis that, hey, there's something bad about being super clean and being these city dwellers. So they weren't sure if it was like cleaner or was it something else that they were doing differently. Like, richer people may be eating different foods, or they may be not growing their foods and getting it from the farm anymore. So it was already discovered all the way 100 years ago, and we're feeling the manifestations of it really now.
Yeah. Wow. There's so much we could spin off to in that, but I do want to, we have so much to cover with you. So I want to know how we kind of can discover on our own if our microbiome is out of balance or suffering. What can we do there?
Okay, so the things I described to you. So mood, say you're feeling really tired or down or anxious, and as compared to your, old baseline or whatever. So mental effects, brain fog is another mental. Then when you go to your body, think about bloating is a sign that something's wrong with your microbiome, and constipation, abdominal pain. And then you look at the hormone side of it, which I said was intimately connected. So if you're feeling like your periods, if you're someone in childbearing age, your periods, you have much worse PMS or they're irregular, or that you're getting weight gain, you're getting inflammation issues like swelling of your body, lips, legs, arms, face, whatever it is. Those are all signs that your microbiome, there's something off, even skin rashes. So there's a host of issues. But the most common I see The most common is fatigue, mood changes, and weight gain. I think those are like the big ones, along with some GI issues. Like a lot of people will experience difficulty digesting the same foods they used to be able to eat, bloating, issues with constipation, etc.
Yeah, I notice I get acne too. Like,
Yes,
you know, when
acne
something's
is
off
another
with
one.
my digestive
Yes,
system, right away, I'm
yes,
starting to break out.
yes.
So
That is
what do we do? Are we able to adjust on our own?
Yeah, so that's a really great question. So the good thing is there's no medication. Pharmaceutical companies have not taken over this yet, because there's really no medication to just quickly correct this disconnect between.
Well, just before you go into that, also, I don't even know if we mentioned the antibiotics that are just being
Yes.
given at every corner, you know, that we are killing off our whole microbiome with, and then having to replenish that over and over, especially when you have them as a child, right? That's a big problem. So someone giving you the antibiotics probably doesn't want to say, well, wait, we need to give you the other thing that's actually, we messed up here a little bit, you know?
Right. So before we knew this concept of the microbiome, we thought that all bacteria are bad, all parasites are bad, and all viruses are bad. So the whole concept was to get rid of everything that you could find. And we didn't realize that they were actually helping us in so many ways. So that is what really, really changed in the last 20 years. But the problem is we're so far into the antibiotic sanitizing culture that we hardly even pay attention to what's happening to our microbiome. In fact, do we really know? You had mentioned the chemicals leaching in into the dirt, right? So do we even know how much of an impact that's making? I mean, there's no information for the normal public on how much this may be influencing our bodies, like cosmetics and, you know, all kinds of chemicals are really bad for the microbiome. So there's a chemical in hand sanitizers, that triclosan, that is actually really bad. It kills all the very good gut bacteria. And, you know, if we just simply told people, hey, why don't you hand wash with a like gentle soap and water and not use a commercial hand sanitizer, we could make a big difference. But the problem is the focus is not on saving the microbiome.
Right now, everyone's
right now with COVID,
for $10 an ounce.
And it's, I mean, it goes back to germ theory, right? And it's this idea of we're in a fight against all germs, all bacteria. And the reality is we need some of those guys. They're good guys.
And in fact, we need them not only just for our digestion, but just for our hormone health and for our brain health. And you wonder, I read something that said depression and anxiety in children is up 60% in the last 10 years. And especially during this recent crises in the world, both with infection and with racism, there is an increase in mental health prescriptions, and I think by 30%, and sleep prescriptions by 15%. So we're suffering. Our brains are suffering, like our emotions are suffering. This balance between the gut and the brain, it goes both ways. So if you have a poor gut, you will have an anxious, depressed brain, and vice versa. And so I think we could be doing a lot to help people manage their mood just by changing, not only, when we can get into it, it's not only what you eat, but when you eat, how you eat, what you do in your daily life. These small little changes can make a big difference.
Yeah. So maybe let's start with, you know, if someone's dealing with an imbalance, and this is personal to me even this week with all that's going on right now. I can probably list off a million reasons why this is likely going on with me, but I'm dealing with a slowdown in detoxing. So like constipation, I'm seeing it on my skin, and I'm feeling it hormonally, like with my PMS symptoms and that type of thing. So when a person's ability to detox properly through regular quality bowel movements slows down like that, how do you go about tackling that issue?
So it's a great question, first of all. I think a lot of people are feeling similar things. So it's funny how you mentioned that it's a detox issue, but I think you're right. You know, a lot of it is in the gut and its ability to function properly. And when it doesn't have, say, the vitamins, the minerals, the water, the stress hormones, or the relaxing hormones, you get into a situation where you're constipated and you're hormonal and you don't feel well. So first things first, I think that when you look at the situation right now, there's a lot of stress in our world, a lot of external stress in our world. When our body is in stress mode, our digestion stops essentially. Our detox system stop essentially. What our body's saying is, hey, there's danger out there. You better, like, they put all the blood flow into your attention centers, your eyes, your big muscles, because they're like, there's a big danger out there and you may need to run. We can't be focusing on digestion and detox and all these repair and renewal mechanisms right now. This is like, we need to save that for later. And so, as you know, sometimes when people are stressed about a big exam or something really big in their life, they won't be able to go to the bathroom, or they have irritable bowels. Irritable bowels. The body is just not doing what it needs to do. Its detox mechanism, because it's sensing danger. And why it's sensing danger is something that you can control. So if you really think about it yourself, you could, 90 seconds of the initial response after something happens is visceral. So you hear bad news, you are watching the news, somebody calls you and tells you about 90 seconds. It's just automatically, you feel kind of like that sinking feeling or that stressed feeling. But after 90 seconds, then it's up to you. So you can either relax your body and breathe through it, think of good thoughts, go for a walk, do the things that you need to do to manage your emotions, or you keep it activated in stress mode. And that's something that I think that we all need to have the tools to learn is, hey, our sympathetic nervous system is constantly being hijacked by, the media, by people who have like really poor energy in our lives. And they're trying to keep you in that stressed fight or flight mode. But you need to learn how to get yourself back into the repair, renew mode. And that takes some skills. So it may be, we talk about vagal breathing. So breathing exercises, just kind of the act of taking a deep, slow breath is actually a signal to your nervous system to switch to the parasympathetic mode. So you're kind of sighing, taking a deep breath and saying to the body, hey, there's no danger here. You may want to go out for it. Nature seems to be very calming for that stress response. So you may want to go for nature, try to cultivate your own tools. That's what we're missing in the modern world. Nobody teaches us that this is a thing and that we need to cultivate tools that work for ourselves. Like, back in the day where everybody was super religious, prayer was a great way to calm that nervous system and say, oh, there's a higher power, we're not in control, just let it be, like, let it, so there's lots of coping mechanisms, and prayer was one of them, and meditation's another one, and yoga is another one, and simply nature and vagal breathing is another one. So cultivating those things are the number one thing.
Yeah, I really love that you point out, first of all, that we have to take responsibility, but I love the magic trick of 90 seconds. Okay, like, give it 90 seconds, let all the, bursts of adrenaline and hormones or cortisol or whatever's happening in there happen, and you're going to feel it and you're going to be in it. You really can't, as hard as we try, it's hard to, it's hard to control that. But after 90 seconds, when that stuff starts to settle and your body's like, hey, should we regulate? And you then take responsibility instead of, being the victim in that circumstance.
And letting it take over
control
your whole life. And then you're stuck in that mode because you don't know how to get out of it. And you can see, that's what anxiety is, right? That's what any kind of, when people say I'm so stressed, like that's what they're experiencing. They're not able to get out of that mode. But nobody's taught us, so we can understand that, hey, nobody's ever told us to use these tools or cultivate these tools. So of course we're not going to know how to do that.
Yeah.
It's tough.
And then, of course, then we talk about food and minerals. And so if you say, okay, I'm going to get my digestion back on, which is the most important thing, right? Get back into that mode, sleep well. And then you say, okay, I'm going to drink more water. I'm going to eat more fiber. Things like magnesium, things like vitamin D, those are all immune calming, nervous system calming kind of minerals and foods. And if you think about it, fibrous vegetables, cruciferous vegetables, so that's like broccoli, cauliflower, and cabbage, those guys actually bind toxins in your gut and bring them out. So
Like
excess
a broom
estrogen.
sweeping. Huh?
Yeah, it's like exactly what it looks like, the broccoli head, how it looks like it's like a broom that's going to suck everything up. That's exactly what it does. It
Is
actually
that one of the reasons why we
takes,
get so bloated when we doing that type of work, or?
yes. So what happens is if your microbiome is not ready for that kind of, it's like a huge stress to the system. So what I tell people is, if that's also a sign that you could work on your microbiome. So you may want to start with like a half cup of cooked broccoli and then work up to a full cup. And then
I was doing sprouts.
yes,
I was looking pregnant like every day
yes,
with sprouts. So
yes.
I
And
eliminate.
so I think that one thing you could do is, like, broccoli sprouts are so super healthy. In fact, they have 10 times more antioxidants than regular broccoli. What I do is just have it in very small amounts. Just because it causes us bloating does not mean that we shouldn't have it forever. Right. It just means that we need to kind of work to it. So what I say is, like, take some cooked broccoli in very small amounts, and over weeks time, you can go up from there. And then, things like magnesium will really actually pull some of that stool, like let you basically
keep
kind of
water
get rid
in your,
of that.
Yeah.
Do you recommend
get rid
magnesium right before bed, or is that something you should just be taking in the daytime, or?
Yeah, magnesium, there's different types of it, but there's something called natural calm, which a lot of people
Yeah, I
use
take
when,
that.
yeah, that's a good one to take at night because it does actually induce sleep as well. So it kind of is a good combination for helping you get rid of some of that stuff. But honestly, increasing the fiber in your food. So if you have a hard time digesting cruciferous vegetables, you can start with like asparagus and spinach, and then add in some little bit of cruciferous vegetables. And then as you get used to it, you can do more. And again, the variety and the amount of fiber is going to be key in replacing and replenishing that microbiome, because that fiber that's in asparagus, artichoke, garlic, onions, that fiber is literally food for the microbiome. So the bacteria eat fiber. And so when you're trying to grow and fix your connection, you need to feed them the right foods.
Yeah, the good bacteria eat the stuff that we probably don't like eating the most, but the bad bacteria eat the things we like the most: sugar, yeast.
Exactly.
So it's all good.
Sorry, my boyfriend had a really high fiber diet, and it gave him IBS, so now he can't have any fiber. So
yeah, it's kind of like too much of a good thing. Okay, so if you imagine if you had that skeleton crew, okay, and you try to eat a ton of fiber, it's really, really hard for your body to digest, and you'll have terrible symptoms.
It's hard work.
But once you fix all of that, you will notice that he's able to tolerate it in good amounts again. It's just kind of fixing the root cause and then going back to, so you won't be able to feed that good gut bacteria tons and tons of fiber in the beginning, because it's just too much for all of us living in the modern world. And especially if you've already had some kind of gut issues. So you need to replenish that first and then start to add in more fiber.
Yeah. And you mentioned sleeping well. You talked about magnesium. What about melatonin? Do you recommend it? Or
I'm a big fan of melatonin, actually, as a natural hormone that induces sleep. So what melatonin does, it just induces sleep. So it's not really helpful for people who have lots of disturbed sleep, and it's not good for people who have sleep apnea and other sleep disturbances, but it's really, really good for people who are doing everything else right, but they want to have help sleeping either earlier because they've switched their times from travel, or because they have an early meeting and they, are just not used to going to bed that early. And, in our world, blue lights in the evening, we often need melatonin because blue lights really block melatonin for 90 minutes, and it's not as intense and not as high because of all the blue light exposure. So lots and lots of people need a supplemental melatonin through different means. You can do it through foods, you can do it through supplements. Now, the big thing is that as we age, we seem to lose our melatonin as well. So people will notice that in their 30s, 40s, 50s, and beyond is when they start to have sleep issues, and that could be a melatonin related issue as well. In COVID-19, they found that the people with the least melatonin had the most chance of getting the virus. And of course, this could be just correlation, but they have found that supplementing melatonin could be helpful in that sense too.
Wow.
And what would be a good supplement for people who are just having trouble staying asleep and they're fine falling asleep?
So it depends. So if you're waking up between the hours of like 2 and 4 a.m., that's likely a cortisol issue, an adrenal cortisol liver detox issue. So a lot of times, as you mentioned, Mercedes, too, like when you're in a stressful situation, you have tons of cortisol because there's something going on in your life, you'll notice that your sleep becomes really light and you wake up between those hours. And so that's a sign that you need to work on that other stuff, the stress control, the mindset, food, because that you cannot get rid of until you actually deal with the root cause. But so a lot of people will say they wake up and they're like kind of panicked or kind of feel like that stress response. That's your cortisol. It naturally spikes a little bit at that time. But when you have, when it's a little bit out of control, I will notice in my life when I'm going through stressful times, I will wake up during those times of the night.
I do that during certain phases of my hormonal cycle also.
Yes. It's also very normal a few days before your period to have a poor night of sleep, 2 or 3 days before your period. That's normal.
Just another thing us gals got to deal with.
Right?
Yeah. How do you feel about the probiotic pills that, are sold on every corner basically?
Yeah. Probiotic, it's like the way I think of it is like throwing seeds over a field when you're in a plane and you're just like randomly throwing packets of seeds. So you're like not even looking whether you're in a desert or a tundra. You're not looking at what seeds you're throwing in that setting. You're just like hoping that something sticks. So could something stick? Yes, it could. Is it a really effective way of changing your microbiome? No. We do have, our body is able to tell the difference between probiotic foods and probiotic pills. So they seem to allow the foods to reach the colon much faster than they allow. Usually they'll destroy as much as they can of a probiotic pill because it looks foreign to them. So for example, I'll tell people, eating kefir, kombucha, fermented foods is probably a better way of getting a little bit of probiotics in your body than hitting yourself with tons and tons of probiotic.
Okay.
So it's basically starve the bugs you don't want and feed the bugs you do want.
100%.
I'm curious too what you feel about like stevia or carbonated beverages.
One of our favorites is being Zevia, which is a stevia flavored carbonated beverage.
Actually, I'm a big fan of Zevia as well because stevia is one of the things, and science is changing all the time. So we may find something to the contrary, but we know that NutraSweet is really bad. Artificial sweeteners, saccharin, aspartame, all of those things are really bad for our bodies. And they also cause an insulin spike. So the whole point of getting a sugarless, like guiltless food or drink is gone because you get the insulin spike. So the same fat hormone, the storage hormones are activated and you're going to get weight gain just like you would have. Now, we don't think that stevia causes that insulin spike, and we don't think monk fruit, erythritol, some of these natural sweeteners cause that insulin spikes. And so for now, those are considered to be better, and they don't affect the microbiome in the way that the other artificial sweeteners do. So what I say is that don't go crazy with it, but if you need a treat, that's the way to go.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of doctors, say if you're going to do anything, do stevia, something sweetens with stevia, but also don't go crazy because we really don't know yet.
I know carbonated beverages, they bloat me big time. So I let myself have one a week, but it's funny that my treat is a Zevia and
I know.
Or Lily's chocolate.
Yeah. I think that treats as the closer to the natural form they can be, the better they are. So for example, I'll give you an example. I used to love like baked goods. That's like my weakness. If there's baked goods, even if especially if they're healthy versions of baked goods, I just love them. And then, so I checked in with myself and I said, what is it about these processed baked goods or just baked goods in general that I love so much? And I realized it was just kind of like that comforting feeling and also mostly it was the chocolate in it because I I didn't really like baked goods that didn't have chocolate in it.
Oh.
So I just basically went to the basics. I got some high quality dark chocolate chips and I took them in the freezer. And for dessert, I will have those high quality dark chocolate chips as kind of a dessert and treat.
Yeah.
And I feel that that is so much better for my gut. It's so much better for my addiction, like my brain, because I'm able to just stop and I get that a little bit of satisfaction. And so it takes a lot of work to strip down what's normal in our society is actually not good for us. So like we have to go and do the very weird, abnormal things, but that are good for our own gut and mind.
Yeah, our well-being. And something I love doing for right now, especially summertime's upon us, freezing grapes, just green grapes and freezing them. They're like little ice cream, you know, once you start eating them frozen like that. I mean, they're still sugary, but at least have fiber in there a little bit.
Yeah, it's a great treat. Just doing these things that are so weird to the standard American culture is like anything that you're doing that's like weird to people is probably right at this point. You know, going back to kind of basics and doing things like, especially when it comes to food and not eating fast. When I tell people sometimes in the office, I'll tell people that they can't eat processed foods, like no drive-throughs. They have to eat something homegrown, no gluten, dairy, whatever, if they're doing a food elimination diet. They look at me like I have 3 heads, like they can't even imagine their life, you know, without having all of those things. And I'm like, it takes a lot of work, but over the years you'll figure it out. It sounds like you guys have already figured it out. And a lot of people have, that they feel better kind of living that little bit of an alternative life.
I mean, I can relate though, because when I asked about, or when Jade asked about Zevia, I was holding my breath for your answer. So I don't want to get rid of my, you know, cheap foods or whatever either.
Yeah. And I called at you when you brought up lilies.
She's like, don't take that away from me now.
Yeah. Right.
Man, we got to go against the grain. Pun intended.
Yeah.
Okay, so we talked a lot about all these other parts of how to get ourselves on track, especially with the microbiome. But you are a intermittent fasting expert. So why is intermittent fasting so awesome?
So, okay, the basic thing, if I had to boil it down for you, there is a clock in every one of our cells, every single one, skin, liver, gut, and we're programmed to do things at certain times of the day and night because you can't be doing everything all at once. So if you're asking your body to constantly digest and constantly take in sugar because you're eating 15, 16 hours into the day, which is what most Americans do, you will never give your body a time to clean and reset and renew. So that is the basic premise about why you should fast for periods of time, because your body needs a natural break from foods, which, you know, before 50 years ago was typical. You know, people didn't eat late into the night and early in the morning. Basically, I tell people like even something like a 12-hour break from food, which seems so simple, but it doesn't happen. Most people eat 15, 16 hours into the day, and then they only take an 8-hour, basically to sleep is the only break they take from food.
So they
we know
late, that looks like, right?
They're eating late into the evening and then first thing in the morning.
Okay.
So if you think about it, if you're constantly getting visitors to your door, you will never be able to deep clean your kitchen or your closets. Like you will always, it'll be a hot mess there. And that's exactly what our cells look like when they're constantly dealing with sugar and insulin. You know, basically when food comes into our body, we get a rush of glucose into our bloodstream, and then our cells take in that glucose through insulin. But when you are fasting for a period of time, your body notices, oh, there's no food coming in for a while, guys. Like this is the time to renew and reset. And there's a process called autophagy. This is a deep cleaning of our cell. This is when our cell really goes in and takes out all the garbage and really does a super deep clean. And that's always happening, but it's happening at very low levels, and it gets turned up as it notices that there's no food coming. And so when you look at a cell that has undergone autophagy, it looks young and it looks clean. And it looks like it's functioning so much better. And of course you want that. You want that for our skin. We want that for our hair. We want that for our gut. We want that for our liver. We want that for our brain. Like we want autophagy happening in our body. And that's only going to happen if you give it a break